Ladies and gentlemen, we're jumping right back into it. Welcome to Talk About Tatooine. I'm Andrew.
I'm Nathan.
And we are twin brothers here to bring you its new nerddom and give colorful commentary on our favorite subjects. Welcome to our cantina. Grab a drink and settle in as we sit course for realities beyond our own. We are right back into the third Tyrannic War. We are talking about the Tyranids invading the Imperium and having a big ol' heyday.
Yeah, no opening banter on this one, guys, because we still have quite a bit to go over. We are picking up on the Cryptus campaign, and if Cryptus sounds a little Necron-y, you're in the right headspace.
So, real quick, Sotha, also a tomb world, and now it's not it. Now it's just it's sort of also still a tomb world, but for different reasons.
Did the Tyranids wake up the Necrons?
I don't know.
Guys, we might have to do a history of Sotha episode specifically just to dig all these out.
I don't need sleep. I need answers.
All right, Andrew, would you lead us off in talking about the Cryptus campaign?
Yes. You know, it's been a bit before we got some other factions involved. Let's bring in the Necrons.
Or we could not. We're not bitter at all because we both lose to the Necrons because our buddy plays Necrons all the time and he's so good.
Yeah, shout out Combrew. You're the best.
He's like, yes, this is why I do it.
I am not worthy. I am not worthy. So, okay. Leviathan assaults the Cryptus system and 41,998. That's 41,998. The Blood Angels take up a campaign against the Bugs, hence the name of this conflict. Wait, why is it called Cryptus if the blood... What?
It's called Cryptus because it's in the Cryptus system and it's the Cryptus campaign.
Oh, okay, I see. Yep. I just had to read one more line down. The Cryptus system... okay. Shut up. The Cryptus...
In his defense, guys, I'm going to cut him off. In his defense, he's reading notes that I wrote and has probably not previewed these. Because we like to leave each other little surprises in the notes sometimes.
Yes. Sometimes, yeah. We do so much writing, so much editing. There's just not time to review a lot of stuff.
Because this is not our full-time jobs unless you all support us on Patreon, Twitch, and YouTube and all those fun places. Go do it now.
Yeah, not unless a bunch of people get real cool real quick. Sometimes our rough draft is also our final draft. Anyway, the Cryptus system operated as a barrier for the Blood Angels' homeworld of Baal. If that sounds like a book title, then you know what's coming up. Dante, Lord Commander Dante, who is the chapter master of the Blood Angels, I think. That sounds right. Dante then sends forces to reinforce the Cryptus system, including the first and second company of Blood Angels. So, first company going in, we know, right, they're all going to die. Most of the Flesh Terrors and other Imperial forces. High Fleet Leviathan had been learning from all its losses, like we talked about in episode 79. High Fleet Leviathan is learning, which is not fair. They're supposed to be dumb bugs. These are smart bugs. And they are adapting super, super fast. What are you laughing at?
I was trying to come up with something like witty, and I was just like, I got nothing.
I'm going to poison your next meal. So High Fleet Leviathan had been learning from all of its losses, so far and adapting extremely quickly. So much so that the High Fleet was able to create new diamond-hard armor for all its ships, significantly reducing the effectiveness of Imperial naval guns. Like we said, the Tyranids don't want to fight in space. They have no need to fight in space because that's not where the organic life is. They want to get to the planet as fast as possible. So you know what helps that? Just put armor plating on all of their ships, and so they can just wet drop pod down onto the planet as fast as possible. Drop their wet, sticky goo onto the planet and get to work.
I would like to propose a new name for mycetic spores. Moist missiles.
I hate it, and I also approve it.
That's going on the short.
Millions of bioships made their way into the system, smashing Imperial ships and making their way to each of the inhabited planets.
Nom nom, nom nom. Planetary Defense Forces watched in horror as these fleets were taken in a matter of hours. Literally hours. They're watching all of their ships be completely destroyed. Fights broke out on every planet in the system. Every man, woman fighting for the Imperium is fighting their hardest to prevent the foe from moving on. Small victories begin to pile up, though. Imperials have been able to fight off the Tyranids in several key areas. It was only after the first day's fighting did the Imperials realize the true threat they faced. So basically, they survived the first day, and they're like, I didn't hear no bell. And the Tyranids were like, dude, there's billions of us. So all of these Tyranids had been slain, but even more came to take their place. And keep in mind, the Tyranids had already lost millions of troops dead, and they were like, we're just getting started. So not only were the Tyranids outnumbering the Imperials by exponential amounts, the adaptation continued. The worlds that had managed the small victories were subsequently smashed and devoured by Leviathan. It took 2 days for the shield worlds, plural, of the Cryptus system to fall. Dante wasn't having it. He led a counterattack at Phobia, securing a victory against these monsters.
And then on another planet called Lysios, the Flesh Terrors emerged victorious, even while the effects of the Black Rage ran through their marines. On Eros, the Blood Angels' second company were able to secure air superiority and defend the survivors of that planet. It was at this point that the Necrons woke up from their sleep on Asphodex. The Mephrit dynasty was awoken by
Anrakir,
thank you, Anrakir the Traveler, with the Traveler allied with the Overlord Zarathustra. Okay, can we get a tally of dumb names that I have to pronounce? The Necrons organized an alliance with the Blood Angels. What is with the Empire working with Xenos? Like, I thought they were, like, xenophobic. I thought that was, like, their whole thing.
They have a tiered version of xenophobia. They're like, okay, hey, we really don't like you metal mummies, but also, like, the Tyranids are going to eat us, and they're still going to kill all of you guys too. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. That is, like, everyone that's alive at this point, minus the orcs. The orcs don't care. Everyone alive basically is like, yeah, we'll help the Imperium fight the Tyranids because they're an existential threat to the galaxy. You can't rule the galaxy if it's filled with bugs, basically.
True. Although, doesn't Gilliman trick the orcs into fighting chaos, is it, at one point? I feel like that happened.
That probably did happen, but I'm not sure.
He, like, whispers, like, hey, do you know who also really likes fighting? The World Eaters. And they were like, that's a great idea. And then the Cockney fungi, launched themselves into the warp.
Oh, no.
Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me
you're not wrong, because I was literally thinking the same thing. I was about to say, wow, that accent was nearly not Cockney enough.
The actual orc accent is so guttural and hard to interpret that, like, again, I'm looking at through the lens that I have to then rewrite all of the closed captioning for any shorts that I make, and I don't want to shoot myself in the foot. I have no problem making your job harder, but when it's making my job harder, yeah, all bets are off. Together, these forces work to activate a super weapon called the Magnovitrium Dope, also called the Starflame, new band name I call it, using it to ignite the core of the gas giant Eros. It's Suncrusher. It's the Suncrusher from Star Wars. Oh, that's so cool. Okay, so the Flesh Terrors and the Sisters of Battle were tasked to hold off the Tyranids, while Blood Angels and Necrons secured relay dishes needed to activate the Starflame. In the battle to secure one of the great mirrors needed for this plan to work, the Necron forces were aided by a transcendent Catan, and Blood Angels received aid from the Sanguinor. So the transcendent Catan is like, is it their trapped star gods?
Yes, I think so.
And then the Sanguinor is like this weird, mysterious angel of the Blood Angels that will show up at random times to save the day.
This is where we're going to introduce some lore facts. All right, guys, time to take a small dive into a rabbit hole. So we're going to talk about the Sanguinor. The Sanguinor is to the Blood Angels almost as the Avatar of Cain is to the Eldar, except not as easy to summon. So the Sanguinor only only appears at the greatest need of the Blood Angels. There's debate whether or not this figure is actually Azkaban or a manifestation of Sanguinius himself. However, it is known that Altron, Alatron, was the herald of Sanguinius during the Unremembered Empire during the Horus Heresy. Now, Alatron took the place of Sanguinius to actually save him from the demon Maudale on their conflict on Davin. Sanguinius himself saw his son transform into an angelic form in his fall with Maudale and eventually was consumed by the warp. Now, knowing this, the Herald, now the Sanguinor, would assist the Blood Angels in their most desperate struggle.
I remember reading that in the book, and I'm like, oh gosh, because it was the word bearers who were trying to basically trap Sanguinius in a chaos cornate ritual to turn him into a bloodthirster?
Pretty much,
yeah.
They were trying to turn him to corn.
Because he's like right on the fence. He's like, I could do it.
Yeah. They're trying to fight chaos. There's corned cream everywhere. It's terrible.
Corn cream. Back to the Blood Angels and the Necrons of present. The Star Flame was activated and incinerated the Tyranids from the system. Sort of like the Halo rings in the Sun Crusher. This did end up killing many Imperial forces as well, with advanced prep and notice. So they rang the bell. They said, you have 10 minutes to get out of here. And they're like, it's going to take us 15. And they said, sucks to suck. The Necrons didn't lose hardly anyone due to their phase shift tech. Sons of they're so hard to kill, even in the lore. I hate it.
Isn't that annoying?
Gosh, it's so annoying. With much of the biomass burnt away, Dante called the Red Council to discuss the defense of Baal, which is the home planet of the Blood Angels. So it's pretty important to them. The surviving citizens in this sector were moved away as there were basically no supplies left to sustain them. In summary, this was not much of an Imperial victory. It basically, they're like, well, it wasn't a victory for the Tyranids. So that's a win in our book. Mostly it was just a delaying tactic against Leviathan. They're basically just trying to starve them out, delay them. That feels like as much as the Imperium is able to do.
We then enter into the devastation of Baal. Now, keep in mind, guys, the year is 41999. At this time, the Indominus Crusade is still going on. So there's guys all around the Imperium that are not fighting the Tyranids, which blows my mind that the Indominus Crusade is actually going on right now, because there are so many conflicts that the Imperium is dealing with. I'm like, how are they not just focused on the Tyranids? That's such a massive threat that it blows my mind that they're not dealing with this. But they can't. They have too many issues to deal with. Not only that, but this is the same year that Cadia fell. In this year, 41999, is when Abaddon's 13th Black Crusade destroys Cadia, causing the giant warp rift. And now the Imperium is in a time called the Blackness, the Days of Blinding, or in High Gothic, the Noctis Eterna, ending with an A. The light of the Astronomicon is not even visible, and astropathic communication, impossible, completely done, and chaos forces are also descending upon the Imperium at this time as well. Even after taking heavy losses in the Cryptus campaign, the forces of the Tyrannus literally blotted out the sun and stars around Baal. Dante commanded the forces and was able to launch preemptive strikes on the splinter fleets, successfully defeating hundreds of these splinters before they reached Baal. So dude's dishing out hits left and right, but it's ultimately not enough to keep Baal from being invaded. The Blood Angels were aided by a force of flesh terrors, blood drinkers, and carmine blades, and knights of blood. Just all of the names that are just one step removed from the Blood Angels. They're all successor chapters of their original legion. Fun fact, just like the Indominus Crusade, this was the biggest gathering of Blood Angels and their successor chapters since the Horus Heresy. 30,000 Space Marines fought on Baal. 30,000.
Oh
that
gosh.
Is 30 chapters worth of Space Marines. That is nothing to blink at, which actually makes the rest of this really sad.
So that is more Space Marines than probably the original Blood Angels Legion had in the first place.
Because legions were close to like 100,000.
I thought the legions were 10,000 apiece. I guess if it was 100,000, then yeah, You're right.
Well, because remember, when we talked in our Ultramarines episode, there was 200,000 Ultramarines.
Oh, you're right. But they had like a lot of troops, more than the usual.
So, quick thing on Lexicanium. Here's what we're looking at. Ultramarines, 250,000 troops.
Whoa.
250, according to Lexicanium.
Did you have that bookmarked? Holy cow.
I just Google quick. Dark Angels, 200,000. We scroll all the way down to Blood Angels, 120,000 Blood Angels.
Okay.
The smallest chapter we have is 80,000 Raven Guard, followed closely by 85,000 Thousand Sons.
Right, because the Raven Guard are almost completely annihilated at Istvan 5. And they're like, I'm never going to financially recover from this.
These are the numbers at the start of the Horus Heresy.
Oh my gosh, and it gets even worse from there. Oh no.
Yeah, so relatively, the Raven Guard Salamanders are both really small. Emperor's Children, there's only like 110,000. Iron Hands of 113,000. Yeah, I'm trying to think. If you look at it, they really took out small legions. Raven Guard, Salamanders, and Iron Hands. Were those the three that they dealt with? Was there anybody else?
No.
No, there wasn't. Not at Istvan. So it was those three. So, but they were still up against quite a bit. Anyways, backing way up. 30,000 Marines. So about a quarter of the size of the original Legion. Still a huge deal. The Shadow of the Warp descended upon the planet, and over 50,000 bioships arrived in system.
Oh,
Space Marine battle barges, strike cruisers, and other ships tore into the armada of Tyranids with everything they have. But yet, the Stars of Baal were only alit with nuclear detonations as the Tyranids eventually pushed through.
Even with great losses, the Imperial effort was not a victory. The entire Excelsius chapter of Space Marines was actually wiped out as ships were isolated, overwhelmed, and devoured.
Serves them right for having a dorky name.
Tyranids then began the invasion of Baal and its 2 moons. Baal boosted a 3-layer defense to hold back the invaders. After 19 waves of bugs, the Tyranids were able to launch a diversion via, Lictor and Gene Stealers against the neophytes inside the monastery. So like we said, the neophytes are the people who are in the process of becoming full-fledged Space Marines. So they're not as strong, they don't have all their special organs, they don't have their full armor. Dante himself led the counterattack to protect these soon-to-be Blood Angels. However, the diversion was successful. The Void Shield fell, and the lines began to crumple.
It is important to note here that Void Shield is actually what kept the Imperial forces safe during those 19 waves, because the Tyranids couldn't deploy a lot of their long-ranged weaponry, air assaults, and mostly artillery.
Gotcha. Probably similar to the shield that enveloped the Death Star 2 from the Forest Moon of Endor from Star Wars.
Or maybe even the base at Hoth in Episode 5.
Boom! Oh gosh. So in this, Dante was actually able to slay the Swarm Lord. He did end up getting wounded, but Baal was basically ready to fall, even with the Swarm Lord dead. However, due to the Great Rift, legions of demons actually began to enter the Baal system and fight the Tyranids. What a twist!
Gosh, you dork.
I couldn't help myself. Led by the arch nemesis of Sanguinius, Kabunda. What? Oh my gosh. Put another strike on the dumb name list. The blood. So, Kabunda, the Bloodthirster, reserved the right to be the destroyer of the Blood Angels. Basically, he was like, you don't.
How petty.
Yeah, it's super petty. Baal at this point was totally lost. Any survivors were being murdered by Chaos forces. Chapter Masters Dante and Gabriel Seth were able to escape only due to an excommunicated Blood Angels chapter giving themselves up to delay the forces of Chaos. It's like, okay, well, that's probably one way to redeem yourself. They were completely destroyed as they were lost to the Black Rage. Then we finally get back to the Ultramarines. We were going to come full circle back to the Blueberries.
It's been exactly 13 minutes since the brothers mentioned the Ultramarines, so now we're back. So,
I'm not even a fan of the Ultramarines. Yes, my Space Marines are blue, but I play as Dark Angels.
what specific shade of blue do you use, brother?
I don't think that matters.
I think it does because it's ultramarine blue, is it not?
So, well, sort of. Sort of. Uh, it's ultramarine blue, but then I use a contrast blue over it, and it does darken it a little bit. And it's supposed to be Seahawks themed because we're from Seattle. Blue and green are our colors, and it looks really good. But they're not ultramarines.
As I mentioned earlier, guys, the Indominus Crusade is going on while all of this is going down. So the Crusade actually arrives at the Ball system. Gilliman and his forces. I knew we were going to get there eventually. Gilliman is in this episode. I'm so sorry. They sweep out the small amount of remaining Tyranids and were able to push out the Chaos forces. There was a large effort then to rebuild the chapters and rebuild their now barren home. Blood Angels would also help and lead a counter-offensive attack against the Bugs, feasting their way across Imperium Nihilus. Basically, Imperium Nihilus was everything north and east of Cadia, galactically, after Cadia fell.
Right, because the Great Rift, also known as the Cicatrix Maledictum, or if you're nasty, Cicatrix Maledictum, cut the universe in half. One half is the Imperium Nihilus, the other is the Imperium Sanctus or something. I don't remember. The Imperium Sanctus is the side with Terra. Imperium Nihilus is the side not with Terra.
Pretty much.
That's all I remember.
Finally, at this point, with everything finally calming down and Ball essentially being a smoking husk, we get into officially M42. The Warhammer 40,000 universe is in the year 42,000. In M42, Leviathan, or I guess this would be M43, wouldn't it?
Yeah?
Yeah, so in the year 42,000, Leviathan, who had just attacked the eastern fringe of the galaxy in the Third Tyranid War, is now attacking the western reaches. So you can start to imagine that like the galaxy is a disk and the Tyranids are holding it. That is essentially what is happening here, and they are reaching around to grab it on all sides.
Tyranid reach around. You heard it here, folks.
My new band name called it. Additionally,
No.
Leviathan set tendrils above and below the galactic plane. This is kind of like a mind F at this point because you don't really think of like galactic travel as a disk, but it kind of is. Like everything is kind of going out from each other. There's not a lot of north and south movement. I'm not entirely sure why that is. Maybe some of our like more experienced science fiction fans would know. Do you kind of know why the galaxy is this way?
I mean, it has to do with things basically line up because of their gravitational pulls in one another. Like in this case, the entire universe is probably spinning around like either a black hole, or in our case, the Milky Way galaxy is expanding from a central point that was probably caused by the Big Bang. That's, I think, the prevailing theory. So it's expanding like a disk, and it's not expanding like a 3D space because reasons.
Because it's spinning as well, right?
Yeah, it's
is it the
spinning.
centripetal motion that is keeping
Sure.
everything in a disk?
Yeah, why
I'm
not?
not sure. Anyways,
Space is weird.
yes. So the tendrils that are now going above and below the plane, Nautilin is going above. Promethor.
You got it. I don't know.
Yeah, add to the sci-fi counter.
Say it confidently, and no one will question you.
Promethor is going below towards, and all of these are basically aiming towards Segmentum Solar, basically the center of the galaxy.
And these are like little Leviathan fingies, right?
Yes. Tendrils, like as they
tendrils
are described. So not like
fingies is the official term, actually.
Okay. As per most invasions, the Imperium encountered the Shadow and the Warp as a calm before the storm, which is super rude because they're already in a warp storm and they're like, hey, by the way, I know the warp is everywhere, but suddenly it's not.
This is a little weird because, like, like this is described as like the calm before the storm, but like doesn't the shadow and the warp also drive all the psychers crazy because they're cut off from the warp?
Yes, if you cut people off from their drug of choice abruptly, they do lose their minds.
That's so perfect. Okay, so in many areas, the Indominus Crusade was actually fighting off forces of other Xenos and heretics, gaining victories against their enemies, only to then be overcome by Tyranid forces. As many as strategists know, fighting a war on multiple fronts is a great idea and you should always do it. Some Imperials rallied for defense while some planets evacuated en masse. They were just like, freaking screw it, I'm out. Big old burp. Wow, that's a lot of gas coming up. Astartes, Imperial Navy, and Astra Militarum forces are now scrambling to
create, sorry, that's a spelling error,
to create sector-spanning defense lines, which, again, great strategists will always spread out their defenses super thin. Like, that's a really good strategy. If you ever want to defend something, just spread everything out super thin, because everyone knows, like, not unlike cheese on a cracker, less is more.
Neither of these two podcast hosts believe that.
Yeah, have you ever heard such horse shit in your life? Less cheese is more?
I ain't no bitch.
I feel like more cheese is more.
Back on track.
Hearing of this threat while the Indominus Crusade was still underway, Trajan Valorous and the Lord Solar Leontis mustered what they could.
Now, who exactly is Trajan Valorous?
He's a bitch.
No, brother. He is the leader of the Custodes. He's the Captain General of the Custodes.
If you need clarification why I said that, go watch, I think it's episode 78. Gilliman basically had to pull the Custodes out of retirement because they were they were sad. Oh, bummer. This
Golden Daddy is gone.
Golden Daddy, no.
I hope there's so many Custodes players that are like, actually. And it's like, oh, I can't wait to hear it.
If Henry Cavill like came into our comments and was like, hey, actually, I found your Custodes comments rude and disrespectful, I would delete this channel. I'd be like, you're right. Like, that was uncalled for. And I will never say anything bad about the Custodes again, and I'll delete my channel.
Please, nobody tag our favorite Lord and Savior of the Warhammer universe, please.
He has bigger things. Don't bother him. Okay, back on track. This resulted in a massive mobilization of forces to meet and hopefully stop the spear thrust towards the Imperium's heart, i.e. Terra. Rapid attack forces were made up and dubbed Soul Blades. Also, great name. Sometimes Warhammer is on top of it, would be like, that is a badass name. And sometimes they're like, oh, we're the Excelsiors.
Nerds.
It's like, what you are is you're giving me an aneurysm, is what you're doing. Because that's so freaking lame. Okay, so the Soul Blades consisted of Space Marines, Sisters of Battle, Militarum Tempestus, Knights, Mechanicum, Inquisition, and Custodes. Massive attack fleets. Basically any like resource they could want, they had. These elite Soul Blades were able to conduct effective counterattacks against the Zerg, the Tyranid forces. While the Soul Blades struck, Lord Solar and Valorous continued to build up their defenses, turning planets into what they called anchor worlds to protect warp travel for the Imperium's supply lines. This is actually a good strategy, and that you can't run a war without supply lines that are well defended. The other two things that I said were good strategy. That was
what was
sarcasm.
It? Fight a war on as many fronts as possible and have thin defensive lines.
Yeah. To the people who didn't get that, they're like, oh gosh, I probably feel so stupid. Yeah, we still love you. Each anchor was given a subsector's worth of resources in which to mount its defense. The Soul Blades, even with harsh losses, were able to disrupt and eventually stall the advances of these hive tendrils. So good things are happening.
So it is important to note at this point is that these soul blades are like having victories that the Imperium desperately needs, but these are disrupting the advances of the tendrils. They're not defeating them. They're not wiping them out. These tendrils are still present. So please keep that in mind as we move on to Hive Tendril Grendulus. Still part of Leviathan, still very much dangerous. In response to the successfully but not stalled, or excuse me, in response to the successful stalling but not defeated of the previous hive tendrils, the hive mind retaliated. This tendril, Grendulus, reached under the galactic plane, perverse,
Gross.
punching well behind the line of the soul blades. Oh my gosh, twins. On the way to the Imperium, Grendulus got to fight through several Votan sectors as well. It's actually noted that Grendulus may or may not have wiped off several minor Xeno species, but we're not going to get into that today. It was at this point that Battle Group Faustus encountered the tendril, and then the Imperium became aware. So they didn't even know. Grendulus was already fighting its way through sectors that just the Imperium didn't control, and then they realized, oh, there's a third one. Grendulus then targets the anchor world of Sanctum, home of the White Templars chapter of Space Marines. Grendulus would devour its way through systems, encountering humans, Votan, orcs, Necron, Drukhari, and several other minor Xenos races. They had a lunch of quite a few different creatures.
That makes me sad that the Votan were devoured, because I think the Votan are super cool. Not only because I'm a huge fan of Deep Rock Galactic, but like Space Dwarves, that's just really cool. And if I make a second army, it's probably going to be Votan.
Yes, the Votan are very cool. So all of these worlds that the Votan had, they no longer did. So also, side note, I feel like orcs would really love Tyranids. I feel like these races were meant to fight each other. I'm thinking this in my head, and we'll actually talk about orcs and Tyranids at later in this episodes. So on the edge of losing the subsector, a Soulblade fleet arrives to combat Grendulus, including Ultramarines, Custodes, Valorous included. Valorous would, at this point, actually end up saving the Sanctum system, which Leontis, Lord Solar, happened to be in to mount this defense. So,
real quick, if you want to know who Lord Solar Leontis is, the channel... Oh, I forgot their name. Hold on 1 second. I'm so sorry. I totally blanked. Lord Solar Leontis. Lore. It's such a good video. I have to mention it. The Templin Institute does a video on Lord Solar Leontis and the Astra Militarum, and it's like a 35-minute video of Warhammer lore, and they do such a good job. They have probably the best production of any Warhammer lore on YouTube. Just throwing it out there. Their stuff is the best stuff.
Excellent. Now, it is important to note at this point that the Soulblades are doing much of the heavy lifting in this conflict in the Fourth Tyrannic War. Due to the nature of the forces, they are able to be successful wherever they go, but they cannot be everywhere at once. They were just engaged with Nautilin and Promothor, left to deal with Grendulus, but the other two tendrils were basically able to operate a little bit more freely. I'll say that without yawning this time. Keep in mind, the Battle of Bastior was a key campaign against Grendulus. Did I write any notes about Bastior? No, I didn't.
No.
Like a fucking idiot. So I'm just going to
you wrote a lot of notes.
I thought I had that. Coming up next, we'll talk about some additional conflicts going throughout the Fourth Tyrannic War. Now, keep in mind, all of these are pretty much right on top of our current marker in time of where the Warhammer 40,000 universe is at right now.
So now we're going to talk about the invasion of Regium. So this is actually the planet that is invaded in the book Leviathan. This was released at the beginning of 10th edition because the 10th edition box is Space Marines versus Tyranids. A book came out with it. This is that book. So if you ever want to read it, spoilers ahead. Except for you have to hear what I have to say. Suck it.
I cannot avoid spoilers. Please continue.
So, Regium is actually a fortress world, part of what's called the Sanctus line. I tried to look up what worlds were included in the Sanctus line. There's no wiki entry for it. But it is a massive line of planets on the border with Segmentum Solar, meant to be a barrier from invasion. I got about that much from the books as well, but there's no other details about like the list of planets that we're in, because I was actually going to like draw a line on my Warhammer map in my book to say like, okay, this is the Sanctus line, and I had no idea. It's a term they made up essentially for that book, which was a little annoying. Why can't they write 10 pages of lore for every little thing they make up? Anyway, so the Ultramarines are able to fight off Leviathan and actually end up blowing up the planet to destroy the forces there. So, like we said, if the Imperium can't defeat the Tyranids, destroy the food source. And what that ended up doing is it ended up slowing the Hive Fleet Leviathan on its way to Terra. But the problem is because the Sanctus line basically was acting sort of like the Great Wall of China, and they blew a hole in it. So now Hive Fleet Leviathan can go right through. They probably won't, because they still do have to do their own form of island hopping, because that's where their food is. But now they don't have to go through the fortress worlds. They can go through the less defended worlds of Ultramar and the interior of the Imperium to get to Terra. Only a handful.
Blow it out.
When in doubt, blow it out. Only a handful of Imperials survived. The planet was destroyed, leaving a hole in the line. So the Battle of Regium, like I said, my contribution to this episode was reading this one book. It was a great book.
So proud of you.
It's devastating. It is totally devastating. The book starts off with a Ultramarine cruiser that encounters the Hive Fleet in space, but it encounters such a small portion of the tendril that a creature that we later learn is a screamer killer, and another creature that is ends up being called the Harbinger, is able to sneak onto the ship, kill everyone on the ship, and basically suck their memories out of their head and like find their way back to Regium. It's horrible. The only survivor from that ship is actually the apothecary Biologus, who is like the main character for the book. He ends up finding a way to actually destroy the planet and also fight the Tyranids at the same time. If you want to know what a gene stealer infestation looks like before the Tyranids invade a planet, this is a great book to read. Leviathan. Like I said, it's called Leviathan because it's being invaded by Hive Fleet Leviathan. During the actual invasion of Regium, the Tyranids start off with atmospheric poisoning. Basically, anyone without a gas mask, it literally melts the flesh off their skin. The fumes get into their lungs and melts them from actually the inside out and just kills everyone. So literally, if you do not have a gas mask or a rebreather, you die. And most of the Imperial Guard on the planet are described as having the flesh on their faces fall off and slough off as they are fighting. It is brutal. They all know that they're going to die, and they still fight anyway.
That's wild.
In this book, we see that we see the improved tactics of Hive Fleet Leviathan just like turned up to 11, including a new psychic threat. So what the Harbinger is actually the new Tyranid unit that they introduced in 10th edition. It's called the... I don't remember.
Psychic Hive Tyrant?
No.
Zoanthrope?
No.
We're talking new psychic threat.
New Tyranid. It's the Norn emissary.
Hmm.
It is, which has psychic capabilities. So the Norn emissary, which is the unit you would see on the tabletop, they called it the Harbinger in the book. So what it did is it actually poisoned the minds of some of the Emperor's ecclesiarchy and tricked them into having visions of heroism fighting the Tyranids. So the members of the ecclesiarchy were having visions of like, hey, this is how we're going to defeat the Tyranids. They would base their strategy off of it. And then the Tyranids would basically just lay traps for them and completely rout the Imperial forces to the point where, I mean, like almost like instantly killing them. Specifically, one of the preachers, he actually has a vision. He's like, hey, I'm actually going to get martyred during this charge, but we are going to be successful. If we take our armored unit and we basically charge into the Tyranid forces in this specific place on the world, we will be victorious because the Emperor has given me a vision. He has shown me that I will be successful. As soon as the Tyranids expose their trap, the preacher himself basically screams in terror, craps his pants, turns around, and is immediately killed. They cut him down immediately, and all of the forces of the Empire immediately go into disarray. There's like 2 survivors that make it out, and it like immediately cripples the entire defensive region because instead of staying behind their fortress walls, they took their massive force and went out to claim this based on literally the drug-induced hallucinations of one of the members of the ecclesiarchy. And the Tyranids had found a way to worm into his thoughts and corrupt those visions. And he was like, I'm serving the Emperor. And they were like, no, you're not.
You're serving us. Thank you.
You are serving yourself onto a silver platter for us to eat. It devastating to read. I was sitting there and I was just thinking, oh no, everything is going wrong.
Just remember, folks, the Emperor has 4 arms.
The 4-armed Emperor.
We also see other events like the Biopurge. Eldar forces are also taking the fight to Leviathan at this point as well, because this also may surprise you. Eldar is made of biomass, so super, super important that they survive. Now, after the Battle of Duriel, which the Eldar had to re-engage High Fleet Kraken to prevent it from merging with Leviathan, so there's still some forces of Kraken that were still alive. If you guys remember, all the way back in the previous episode, we talked about High Fleet Kraken in the Second Tyrannic War, and this also we covered in the Battle of Eandon, the Craft World. So keep in mind, Eandon's coming back with this. So that's where we're at. Let me skip back to my notes. So during all of this, the Eldar have now come up with a new weapon, the Fireheart, a psychic device that detonated the core of planets to destroy all life on the world. Basically, they are just sticking in line with the previous doctrine of kill the food, kill the Tyranid. It's literally Halo all over again.
So even the Eldar, a species that is known for basically looking down their nose at humans and literally calling us monkeys, is like, actually, yeah, we don't have a better plan either.
Yes. This involved the forces of Craft World Eandon, as well as the Dark Eldar and Bealtan forces. With this tech, the Eldar attempt to starve Leviathan of fuel. Stupid Halo monitors trying to blow everything up. Obviously, the Imperium didn't like this, because what's happening is the Imperium is fighting the Tyranids over here, and the Eldar are like, hey, we actually see all these Imperial worlds. We're going to kill all these Imperial worlds so that Leviathan can't take these and then move over and attack the Imperium. So they're like, hey, we're doing you a favor. And the Imperium's like, we still live there. We're still alive.
Right,
don't
because the Eldar don't have any of their planets because they're, I don't know, they're dumbasses. They've had to basically live on their world ships called the Craft Worlds. They live in space. They are a nomadic culture now because they destroyed their home world, I think.
The Eldar were too horny for their own good and got bonked off of all of their planets.
Right. Literally the creation of Slaanesh destroyed their homeworld, and now they are cursed to travel space forever. Did they really only have one world, or did Slaanesh just destroy all of their worlds?
They destroyed almost every single world, I think, except the Exodite forces, but today's not an Eldar episode. I cannot get into that. So,
Okie doke.
The Eldar are fighting the Imperium again, and the Imperium's like, I took that personal. So 40 chapters of Marines are now mobilized into this conflict zone with the Eldar, where the Imperium got 40 chapters of Marines to mobilize while the Indominus Crusade is going on, and the Fourth Tyrannic War, and basically the Third Tyrannic War, while there's multiple fronts against the bugs. I have no idea.
Oh, it's because Belisarius Cawl made all of those new Primaris Marines. Like literally, like Gilliman is just making it rain Primaris Marines. I don't know really the specifics of how he was able to create so many, but Cawl was able to just say like, hey, I have tens of thousands of new Marines. Where do you want these? And Gilliman is like, I have big plans. These are going to go everywhere.
Yeah.
He just salt bayed the new Primaris Marines all over the galaxy.
A little bit of everywhere. So not only does the Imperium have to deal with Tyranids, an existential threat arguably bigger than Horus, and Eldar, they are getting their worlds blown up just to fight the bugs. The Eldar just want to win, but the Imperium wants to win, but have something left to come back to.
Yeah, it's like, excuse me, just because you ruined your worlds doesn't mean you need to also ruin ours. We're doing that just fine on our own.
Thank you so much. Remember all of our wonderful exterminati? We're doing great.
Exterminati. There's a joke in there, but I am going to keep us moving. Okay, next we're going to move on to the planet of Tesla Prime. So Cryptman's back. Inquisitor Cryptman. Remember the guy from earlier that wanted to do all the exterminati on worlds so that the Terminids couldn't have them? Well, now essentially the Eldar are doing the same thing, so like Cryptman is like, vindication. Cryptman orders the evacuation of this world, leaving a shitload of Mechanicum tech behind, which I'm sure they're thrilled about, in a world where technology is being lost left and right. Sure, that doesn't make me...
Technology is my religion.
Yes. There just wasn't time to take everything. So the most cumbersome and consequently most expensive toys got left behind. That makes me really sad, because it's probably like Titans and stuff.
Lots of big guns.
So what happens next? Obviously, an orc raid. Seriously? An orc raid? Oh my gosh.
I wrote this one, guys, and so he's just reading this, and I was like, guess what's happening next?
I know. You wrote 70 to 90% of this episode. I'm just here to add someone to talk to.
Closer to 90. I spent a lot of time at work writing all of this week.
And I had to actually do my job. So sometimes I would much rather work on this. This is way more fun than my job. My job is so boring.
That's fair. My job is fun.
Your job does sound like a lot of fun. It makes me... Anyway, we're not here to talk about the mundane grinding of our everyday jobs. Orcs descend on the planet, find new toys, and basically start blowing everything up. As the orcs fight with the Tyranids, the conflict there spreads to several nearby worlds, because why wouldn't it? This was somehow a huge win for the Imperium, because they just got a lot of breathing room. So this is like the equivalent of the United States arming, or like, this is like the Contra affair if it went well. Like, hey, let's arm a bunch of people. But then like they did, well, no, they probably will turn on them actually. So it's exactly like the Contra affair. The Imperium was able to recover and then reinforce many of their strongholds in the meantime. Also, I should mention that Cryptman was not part of the Inquisition anymore at this point. What do you have to do to get kicked out of the Inquisition but not killed?
I'm not entirely sure. I did not have time to like dive down that rabbit hole, because that note I put in this morning.
so many rabbit holes. Literally, like I went down a couple rabbit holes and I ended up like with paragraphs and paragraphs of information on the page. And that's why I like couldn't get that far down, because like I was hitting every single rabbit hole that I was finding, and I was like, I'm getting real bogged down. I'm getting real bogged down.
Fun fact about all of this is on the wiki, there are 19 other conflicts during the Fourth Tyrannic War that we didn't even cover.
Oh my gosh.
We only covered like some of like the primary points and like how other factions are involved.
Oh my gosh.
Gilliman showed up. Like that's essentially like all of the stuff that we are talking about. But essentially yeah.
Hey, hold on. Where the heck is the lion?
I actually don't know where he is in all of this. I have no idea.
What is he doing?
Now, my prediction is that we are going to see the return of another Primarch during the Fourth Tyrannic War, because there's no way that Terra is going to come under existential threat, and only 2 Primarchs are available to fight off 4 other Demon Primarchs and multiple tendrils of the largest Tyranid hive fleet to date.
I have a prediction on who it's going to be, too. So, with the Space Marine 2 campaign, we specifically see some gameplay of us fighting the Thousand Sons. Who are the arch nemesis of the Thousand Sons?
The Space Wolves.
The Space Wolves. So I think it would be very poetic for Leman Russ to return to the 40k universe to help you to fight the Tyranids and also maybe kick some Thousand Son ass while they're at it. And the poetic part would be that Gilliman, the Lion, and Russ would be able to be at essentially what is like the next big siege of Terra, because they weren't at the first one. Like the Lion shows up for like the very, very end, but like Horus was already dead at that point. Or the Lion and Gilliman show up, and I don't know where Russ was.
He's somewhere. The Vilka Fenrica have come to solve all your problems.
He was in absentia. Yes, also I love that accent. The Vilka Fenrica.
That is High Gothic, but that is Fenrisian for Space Wolves, which they don't like being called Space Wolves. Every time they get called Space Wolves, they're like, you're lucky we don't bite your head off. Every single time.
Yes.
They hate it.
Even though they are Space Wolves.
I'm like, you are astral doggos.
The Space Wolf Omnibus was the first Warhammer set I ever read. And I was like, this is the best thing I've ever read in my whole life, and I'm hooked.
I remember reading that as well, and I was like, this is really bloody. I think I love it.
I feel strange. I feel like an adult. Should I be reading this?
This all leads us, guys, to getting into the Space Marine 2 campaign, where we fight on 3 different planets, all infested by Tyranids, but we also know that we are going to see Thousand Sons come into play. We've already seen Chaos and Tyranids basically interacting with who gets to actually kill the Imperium, so we might get to see that again. What if we got to see Magnus?
I would be so jacked if we got to see Magnus, because that would be really interesting, because Titus has, for reasons we still don't understand, somehow is unaffected for the most part by the warp. Things that usually should kill him just slow him down. Although if anyone is going to kill him with a blast of psychic energy, it's going to be Magnus.
Yeah, Magnus is going to be like, that's cute, and like rip his atoms apart. It's going to be fantastic.
Yes. Magnus is definitely the most beautiful of the Demon Primarchs.
Agreed, actually. Guys, we have finished talking about the Tyranids for now.
My voice hurts.
Episode 80 is coming to an end. We're going to talk about just 2 pieces of news from the HoloNet. We're going to thank our patrons, and we're going to sign off because I need to go to bed. So, 2 quick pieces of news. Xbox Game Pass is getting another price increase. Boo.
Boo. $20 a month for the largest, for Game Pass Ultimate. They're introducing a mid-tier, which will not have the day one benefits. So if you want to be able to play some of their AAA titles day one, you actually do have to get the Ultimate, which is $20 a month. So you're paying $200 240, so $264 a year approximately. We have a 10% sales tax in Washington, so that's great. That's a lot of money. I'm like, so I'm actually canceling my Amazon Prime because I'm like, no, if I'm going to pay for one, I'm keeping Xbox, and I will figure out another way to watch The Boys.
I actually also canceled my Prime subscription as well. And
there's just not enough good stuff.
I canceled my Minecraft subscription as well to Realms. So I'm making room for this. Not super happy about the price increase, especially since the things tend to be increasing faster than my wages. But that is not what we were here to talk about. I will leave that to other people who have, I don't know. I like writing about Warhammer lore. I don't think I could get paid enough to write about the news. Games Workshop has also released the Pariah Nexus Tournament Companion. I have not read about that. All I saw was that you posted a link to it. So, whatever that means to you is what you need to know. Guys, if you guys want to get into more of like the tabletop stuff, sometimes we cover that. Sometimes we don't. There's a lot to cover. We highly recommend following Auspex Tactics, who does very detailed breakdowns of all of the tabletop stuff, and Chapter Master Valorak. He does a very good blend of both, where he does talk about things on the tabletop, and he talks about video games coming up as well.
And I would actually add Vanguard Tactics. They do battle reports, but they also do codex reviews, and they are a competitive 40K channel. They do a really good job.
All right, guys. Huge shout out to all of our biggest supporters over on Patreon and Twitch: Mike, Isaac, David, and Calmbrew. You guys are the reason we do this and are able to continue doing what we do, because recording software ain't free and doing giveaways is not free either. Brother, we've got a lightsaber giveaway coming up, and for just $5 a month, you can enter that lightsaber giveaway by supporting us on Patreon, which also goes into supporting the podcast as well. We do other things like giveaways throughout the year, gaming events, and basically just trying to give you guys the highest quality content we can. We do not get ad revenue from almost anybody. It's really important that you guys support us on Patreon, so please go do that. So if you guys are not able...
I cannot emphasize enough. By the time you are listening to this episode, you are running out of time to enter the lightsaber giveaway. This episode, I believe, is coming out on July 22nd. You have less than 2 weeks to be able to enter our lightsaber giveaway. If you need more information, the link is in our description. We stream all the time, and we have links there as well over on Twitch. Please check us out. We give away free lightsabers. They're awesome, or mostly free. A highly subsidized lightsaber.
It is a lottery system. We give you guys, if you guys support us on Patreon or Twitch, or buy something from our Etsy shop, you guys get a ticket. We throw it into a jar at the end of the giveaway, which we are going to do live. We will draw a ticket from that jar, and we will get a winner. So please support us, guys. That helps us out a ton. Guys, we also hit some big milestones over on YouTube as well. Like, we just hit 500 subscribers. So thank you all for subscribing to the channel. We really appreciate that. If you guys can't support us on Patreon, like the video, comment, tell your friends to subscribe, and watch our videos. Guys, this is literally one of the best ways to support us. We mentioned that we don't have ad money, but because we're trying to make our way onto YouTube as well, we can potentially get more funding without you guys having to pay for it. But we need you guys to watch and interact with the content, because that tells other people that cool things are happening. That is why we do our sign off every week that says the algorithmic overlords will slice this video or push this video into the feeds of others. So we really do appreciate that. With that being said, thank you guys for watching. Leave your theories in the comments. We'll see you guys in the next one. And until then, the four-armed emperor protects.